Welcome to this deep dive, and this one is tailored specifically for you because you actually provided us with the source material.
Exciting.
A collection of intelligence reports all about the hacking group Ghostwriter.
It's really fascinating stuff and kind of alarming when you see it all laid out.
Yeah, especially when you start piecing it all together.
Uh-huh.
Reports from groups like Fortinet, Cybele, and even CertUA
Right.
were basically going to trace Ghostwriter's activities
Yeah.
using this open source intelligence.
That's like we're digital detectives almost.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Researchers found what appeared to be simple Excel files targeting the Ukrainian military.
Right.
How did they know Ghostwriter was behind these attacks? Did these files contain some kind of digital signature or something?
Yeah, you can think of it like fingerprints on a weapon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the files contain lines of code and functionalities that link them back to Ghostwriter.
Okay.
Researchers at Fortinet and Cybele took it a step further and started examining the domain names and IP addresses, which are kind of like digital breadcrumbs left at a crime scene.
So they're like little clues.
Exactly. They're officially called indicators of compromise, or IOCs.
IOCs, okay.
So that's what we're going to be following, these IOCs.
Now, you've used the word pattern a few times.
Yeah.
What sort of pattern are we talking about here? Is this something that only cybersecurity experts would be able to spot?
Well, many of the malicious domains, they shared similar registration details,
Okay.
like the same registrar named servers.
Huh.
And they even had the exact same robots.txt file, which tells search engines which pages to crawl on a website.
So just to pause for a second and make sure I understand, this robots.txt file,
Yeah.
it's not something that you'd normally think of as being suspicious?
No, not at all. But it was exactly the same across multiple malicious domains.
So is the same content, the same exact file?
Same exact file, which is unusual, and this reveals a key aspect of Ghostwriter, their meticulous attention to detail,
Yeah.
which frankly makes them a pretty formidable adversary.
Yeah. They're very organized, it seems.
Right.
So they're not just randomly registering domains.
Right.
You're going through a process which suggests a level of sophistication and organization that's a little worrying.
Right.
But I'm guessing researchers didn't stop there, right? They didn't just look at a few files and call it a day.
No.
What did they do with these patterns they were uncovering?
They took this unique robots.txt file and used it as a starting point to search for other domains that shared the same, let's say, digital fingerprint.
So they took this one specific detail, this robots.txt file, and they said, okay, let's see what other domains out there have this exact same file,
Right.
which must have turned up a few results, right? I mean, how many domains share this unique robots.txt?
They uncovered a network of 24 domains potentially linked to Ghostwriter.
Wow, 24 domains.
Some of them had names like BackstageMerch.shop, DisneyFoodBlog.shop, Physio.pedia.shop.
These sound very inconspicuous, like they're trying to blend in.
Absolutely, designed to avoid suspicion.
24 domains, that's a pretty significant finding. It suggests an operation of considerable scale.
Right.
But what did researchers do with this list of domains? Did they just add them to a watch list or something?
Well, they uploaded those 24 domains to VirusTotal.
Oh, okay, VirusTotal. Right.
You can think of it as a giant online database for scanning files and URLs for malware.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of it. But isn't that just for scanning individual files? How does that help with understanding an entire network of domains?
Well, VirusTotal has this great feature where it shows you all the connections
Okay.
a file or domain has. So they use that to see which malicious files had communicated with those 24 domains.
So it maps out the relationships between those 24 domains and any known malicious files that are out there.
Right, and to make it even more visually compelling, there's a feature called VirusTotal Graph
Okay.
that creates this map of all the connections, almost like watching a criminal network light up before your very eyes.
So they started with a few malicious files,
Yeah.
used IOCs to find patterns in the domain registrations, then used those patterns to uncover this network of 24 domains.
Yes.
And finally, used VirusTotal to find even more malware samples.
It's pretty amazing.
It's like they stumbled upon a loose thread and followed it and unraveled this whole complex web of connections.
Yeah.
All of this from a few Excel files.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's a real testament to the power of open source intelligence and the dedication of these researchers who are piecing together these digital puzzles.
Absolutely.
But this begs the question, why does all this detective work even matter? What can we actually learn from attributing these activities to Ghostwriter? I mean, we've identified the culprit, but so what?
Well, It helps us understand who is being targeted.
Okay.
In this case, we see a clear focus on the Ukrainian military, which raises some questions about geopolitical motives.
So this isn't just some random cybercrime.
No,
It seems like there's a strategic element to these attacks.
it's organized.
What else can we learn from this type of investigation?
Well, it reveals the attacker's sophistication.
Okay.
The level of care taken in creating this infrastructure using those seemingly innocuous domain names, those very specific registration patterns, it all points to a well-resourced and organized adversary.
So this isn't some lone wolf operating in the shadows. We're
Right.
talking about a group with resources and a plan. But even the best laid plans can go astray, right? People make mistakes, even hackers.
Absolutely, you're right. And that brings us to Andrei Koronets.
Oh, who's Andrei Koronets?
He's a Russian hacker
Mm-hmm.
whose real identity was revealed because of his, let's say, sloppy domain registration habits.
Wait, so this hacker was caught because he didn't cover his tracks properly. How is that even possible in the world of cyber espionage where anonymity is supposed to be, everything? What happened?
Well, he was working for the FSB, the Russian Federal Security Service, registering domains for their phishing campaigns.
Okay.
He reused email addresses, used similar patterns, and basically left a trail of breadcrumbs that led right back to him.
Oh,
His mistakes led to sanctions from the U.S. Treasury Department.
so actions have consequences, even in the digital world.
Absolutely.
So we've gone from a few malicious files to this sprawling network of domains and malware, all linked to Ghostwriter.
Yeah.
It's a pretty impressive, albeit unsettling, display of cyber espionage. But what does the future hold for this group? Could their techniques be used to uncover other APT groups?
You know what? I think we should probably pause here,
Okay,
come back in part 2,
sounds good.
to explore these questions further.
I'm ready. Yeah, that's an excellent question to think about as we kind of try to figure out more about Ghostwriter.
Yeah, like having a blueprint to uncover these hidden operations. So we've established the Ghostwriter is highly organized
Yeah,
and targets the Ukrainian military.
right.
But what are they hoping to achieve with these attacks? Can't just be about infiltrating systems for the sake of it, right?
Right,
There has to be some sort of objective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Based on what you've shared, it seems that their primary objective is information warfare. Okay, so not just stealing data, not just spying,
Right.
but actively trying to manipulate public opinion.
Exactly.
So discord,
Yeah.
undermine trust, and specifically in Ukraine.
Yeah, particularly institutions within Ukraine.
This raises a chilling question, like what is Ghostwriter's ultimate goal? Is it just espionage or something more insidious? How do they actually use this infrastructure to manipulate and influence?
So one way they do this is by compromising trusted media platforms.
Okay.
Imagine if they were able to hack into the Twitter account of a well-respected journalist or media outlet.
Oh.
They could then use that account to spread disinformation to this vast audience that already trusts that individual.
That's terrifying.
It is like a digital Trojan horse.
Are there any real-world examples of this happening?
Oh, absolutely. In 2013, the Associated Press's Twitter account was hacked.
Oh, wow.
The hackers sent out a fake tweet about explosions at the White House, which caused a stock market dip.
Oh, my goodness.
That hack was attributed to a Russian group called Fancy Bear,
Okay,
also known as APT-28.
right.
So even a single tweet can have this massive impact if it comes from the right source.
Yeah, it seems almost too easy to manipulate public perception these days.
Yeah, it's scary how quickly things can spread online.
So what other methods do they use?
Another tactic is creating fake news portals.
Okay.
These websites mimic legitimate news outlets.
Okay.
Often using very similar domain names, they're designed to trick people into thinking they're visiting a trusted source.
Yeah, I can see how people could easily fall for that, especially if they're not paying close attention to the URL.
Right, exactly.
Are there any examples of this?
During the 2016 U.S. elections, a Russian troll farm known as the Internet Research Agency, or IRA,
Okay.
created a network of fake local news websites like the Tennessee Guardian.
Oh, interesting.
And these sites were designed to look like genuine news sources,
Wow.
but they were actually pumping out divisive content aimed at influencing voters.
So they're not just creating fake news, they're creating entire ecosystems of disinformation.
It's like a whole parallel universe of information.
And I imagine social media plays a huge role in all of this as well, right?
Social media is a prime battleground for information warfare.
Uh-huh.
Ghostwriter and other groups use fake accounts, bots, and even AI-generated content
Oh, wow.
to amplify their narratives and manipulate online conversations.
So it's like they're turning social media algorithms against us, using those systems that are designed to keep us engaged to instead trap us in these echo chambers of misinformation.
Right. It's very clever, but also very dangerous.
Can you give me an example of how these groups use bots and fake accounts to spread disinformation?
One notable example is a Chinese group known as Spamiflage Dragon,
Okay.
which has been linked to thousands of fake Facebook and Twitter accounts used to spread propaganda.
So it's not just a problem confined to one country or region.
It's a global phenomenon.
What other tactics do they use on social media?
They're masters at hijacking trending topics
Yeah.
and hashtags they'll piggyback on legitimate social movements or newsworthy events and inject their propaganda into those conversations.
So they're not just creating their own narratives, they're twisting existing ones to suit their needs.
Exactly.
Do you have an example of this?
During the Black Lives Matter protests, Russian trolls were found to be exploiting the movement's hashtags
Oh,
to
no.
sow discord and inflame racial tensions in the U.S.
That's really disturbing.
Yeah, it's taking advantage of real-world events for their own agenda.
And I imagine they also leverage paid advertising
Oh,
to
absolutely.
target specific demographics, right?
Paid advertising is a powerful tool for amplifying those disinformation campaigns. By purchasing targeted ads,
Right.
they can ensure their message reaches the right audience.
Okay.
A prime example is the 2016 U.S. elections, where the IRA spent over $100,000 on Facebook ads
Wow.
to promote fake news stories and divisive content.
So they're using the same tools and strategies that legitimate organizations use, but for a much darker purpose.
Exactly. It's perverting the system from within.
But it can't just be about websites and social media and paid ads, right? They must have other methods for spreading this disinformation.
Yeah, you're right. One of their more insidious tactics is to exploit trusted channels,
Okay.
essentially hijacking the credibility of legitimate sources to lend weight to their own narratives.
So how do they go about doing that?
One way is by compromising the accounts of experts or influencers. Imagine if they were able to hack into the Twitter account of a well-respected journalist or academic or even a celebrity.
Right.
They could then use that account to spread disinformation to a vast audience that already trusts that individual.
It's scary to think about how easily they could manipulate people's trust.
It really is. And it's not just limited to social media.
Oh, okay.
In 2020, APT-29, a Russian hacking group, targeted COVID-19 researchers.
Oh, wow.
In an attempt to steal and manipulate vaccine data, imagine the damage they could have done if they had succeeded in altering or leaking that information, casting doubt on the safety or efficacy of vaccines.
It's terrifying to think about.
And then you have forged documents as well, things like fabricated emails, doctored reports.
Right, right.
And in the case of Ghostwriter, we've seen this tactic used in a very specific way. They actually forged NATO documents that falsely claimed U.S. troops were smuggling drugs into Lithuania.
No way.
A clear attempt to damage relations between NATO members.
It's incredible how they can create these elaborate forgeries and then use them to influence geopolitical events. This really does feel like something out of a spy thriller. But with all the efforts being made to combat disinformation, fact-checking websites, media literacy campaigns, even government regulations, how do these groups manage to evade detection? Do they have some sort of magic invisibility cloak?
Well, it's not magic, but they've become masters of evasion, constantly adapting their tactics to stay ahead of those detection mechanisms.
So what are some of their go-to evasion techniques? How do they manage to fly under the radar?
One common tactic is geospoofing. They use VPNs and proxy servers to mask their location, making it appear as though their activity is originating from a different country.
So they're creating a digital alibi.
Exactly. They're trying to make it harder to trace their real location.
What other evasion tactics do they use?
They also increasingly rely on encrypted channels,
Okay.
like Telegram or Discord,
Right.
to coordinate their activities and communicate with their network of operatives.
So they're going dark, using platforms designed for privacy to shield their activities from scrutiny.
Right, it makes it much harder to monitor their communications.
Are there any other evasion techniques that are worth mentioning?
They're increasingly using AI-generated faces for their fake profiles.
Oh, wow. So you can't even tell if you're interacting with a real person or not.
Exactly. It makes it even harder to identify and flag those fake accounts.
It's like they're constantly raising the bar, making it more and more challenging to expose their tactics.
It's a constant cat and mouse game.
But despite all these evasion techniques, there must be some success stories, right? Cases where these groups have been caught and held accountable for their actions.
Oh, absolutely. We already mentioned Andrei Kornets,
Right, right,
the Russian hacker who was exposed due to his careless domain registration habits.
right.
But there are larger scale examples as well. The 2016 U.S. elections, for instance, brought to light the extent of Russian interference, leading to investigations, indictments, and even sanctions.
So there is hope, even though they're constantly evolving their tactics, they're not invincible.
Exactly. And those successes highlight the importance of collaboration between tech platforms, governments, and individuals.
Mhm.
It's about sharing information, developing new detection tools, and raising public awareness about the threat of disinformation.
So it's a multi-pronged approach, tackling the problem from all angles.
That's right. It's going to take a collective effort to effectively counter this threat.
But let's shift focus for a moment and dive into some specific examples of how these groups have used their tactics to achieve their goals. Let's start with the 2016 US elections, a case that really shook the world and exposed the vulnerabilities of our democracies to this kind of information warfare.
The 2016 U.S. elections were a watershed moment, a stark illustration of how state-sponsored actors can weaponize information to influence democratic processes.
So it wasn't just about trying to get one candidate elected over another, it was about something much larger and more sinister.
Exactly. Their goal was to erode faith in the democratic system itself, to create chaos and division, and to ultimately weaken the U.S. from within.
Like what? Give me some specifics.
One of the most high-profile events was the hacking of the Democratic National Committee's email servers.
Right.
Those emails were then leaked to WikiLeaks, causing significant embarrassment and fueling accusations of corruption within the Democratic Party.
And that was Guccifer 2.0, right?
This leak, attributed to Guccifer 2.0, widely believed to be a front for Russian intelligence, had a profound impact on the election, dominating news cycles and shaping public perceptions.
It's amazing how they were able to weaponize stolen information to create such a damaging narrative.
And it wasn't just about hacking and leaking. They also created fake social media groups,
Okay.
like Art of Texas, designed to stoke anger and resentment among specific voter demographics. These groups organized rallies, spread divisive content, and effectively amplified pre-existing social tensions, further polarizing the electorate.
So it was a combination of online and offline tactics, using social media to manipulate real-world events. What was the impact of all this interference?
The full extent of the impact is still being debated, but there's no doubt that Russian interference played a significant role in shaping the outcome of the election. By polarizing public opinion and manipulating the flow of information, they created an environment where it became easier for their preferred candidate to succeed.
It's a sobering reminder of how vulnerable our democracies are to this kind of information warfare.
It really is a wake-up call.
But the 2016 elections weren't an isolated incident, right? We've seen similar tactics used in other contexts as well.
Absolutely. The COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, became a breeding ground for disinformation, with state-sponsored actors seizing the opportunity to spread fear, confusion, and distrust.
It's like they were exploiting a global health crisis for their own geopolitical gain.
Exactly. And China, in particular, was very active in pushing false narratives about the origins of the virus and the effectiveness of different treatments.
What specific tactics did they use?
They leveraged social media platforms, particularly Twitter and WeChat, to push narratives suggesting that COVID-19 originated in U.S. labs or was a bioweapon engineered by the West.
Oh, wow.
They also circulated forged World Health Organization documents designed to deflect blame and sow confusion about the pandemic's origins.
It's incredible how they were able to twist a global health crisis to fit their own narrative. And it wasn't just about China, right? We've seen other examples of state-sponsored disinformation campaigns related to the pandemic.
Absolutely. Russia, for instance, was active in spreading disinformation about the safety and efficacy of Western-developed vaccines, while simultaneously promoting their own Sputnik V vaccine as a superior alternative.
It's a reminder that these groups are constantly looking for opportunities to exploit global events and shape narratives to their advantage. And it's not just elections and pandemics, right?
Yeah.
We've seen similar tactics used in the context of armed conflict as well. The ongoing war in Ukraine is a prime example.
The war in Ukraine has become a battleground not just for physical territory, but also for information.
Right.
Russia, in particular, has been waging an aggressive disinformation campaign aimed at justifying their invasion, demonizing Ukraine, and undermining Western support for the Ukrainian resistance.
So they're using disinformation as a weapon to complement their military operations. What specific tactics have we seen in this context?
We've seen everything from deepfake videos purporting to show Ukrainian President Zelensky surrendering to the dissemination of fabricated reports about Ukrainian atrocities. They've also engaged in hacking and leaking operations targeting Ukrainian media outlets, attempting to spread panic and sow discord among the population.
It's a stark reminder that this isn't just about online propaganda or manipulating social media trends. This has real-world consequences, influencing the course of conflicts and shaping public perceptions of those involved. We've covered a lot of ground here, from ghostwriters' infrastructure to their tactics, from election interference to pandemic disinformation and the war in Ukraine. It's a complex and constantly evolving landscape, but one thing is clear. The threat of state-sponsored disinformation is real, and it's something we need to take seriously.
You're absolutely right. This isn't just some abstract problem happening in the digital realm. It's affecting our democracies, our societies, and our understanding of the world around us.
And the more we understand about these tactics, the better equipped we are to counter them.
Exactly. Knowledge is power in this fight.
And on that note, I think it's time for another pause.
Okay.
When we return in part 3, we'll delve into some of the strategies being developed to mitigate this threat and discuss what the future holds for this ongoing battle for truth and information. Welcome back. We've spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive exploring ghostwriters' methods and just how pervasive these state-sponsored disinformation campaigns can be. And, looking at all of this, it's clear this problem isn't going away anytime soon.
It's not, unfortunately.
So what can we do about it? What's being done to fight back against these masters of manipulation?
That's the million-dollar question. And thankfully, there are a number of strategies being employed, from the tech platforms themselves to governments and even individuals like you and me.
So let's start with the tech platforms.
Okay.
These are the battlegrounds where so much of this information warfare is taking place.
Right.
What are they doing to combat disinformation on their platforms?
Well, tech companies are finally recognizing their responsibility in all of this.
Yeah.
And they're investing in tools and policies designed to detect and remove fake accounts,
Right?
flag misleading content, and disrupt these coordinated campaigns.
So it's like they're trying to build a digital fortress to protect users from these attacks.
Exactly. It's about making their platforms much more hostile environments for groups like Ghostwriter to operate in.
So what specific steps are they taking?
One key area is improving account verification, implementing stricter identity verification requirements, and using machine learning to identify suspicious activity.
Like what kind of suspicious activity?
Like accounts that post at all hours or share identical content across multiple accounts.
So it's not just about reacting to disinformation after it's been spread.
Yeah.
They're trying to prevent those fake accounts from even being created in the first place.
Exactly. And they're also developing sophisticated content moderation systems using a combination of AI and human reviewers
Right.
to identify and flag content that violates their terms of service.
Including disinformation?
Including disinformation. Yeah, it's an ongoing arms race.
Yeah.
Constantly trying to stay one step ahead.
Okay, but what about those financially motivated disinformation campaigns? We talked earlier about how groups like the IRA use paid advertising to spread their message. Is there any way to stop that?
Well, platforms are cracking down on this as well, making it much harder for those malicious actors to use paid advertising for their disinformation campaigns. They're improving their ad transparency policies and making it more difficult to target those ads.
So it's about cutting off their funding, making it less financially viable to spread disinformation in the first place.
Right.
Are there any other strategies they're using?
They're also increasingly partnering with fact-checking organizations
Okay.
to verify the accuracy of the information being shared.
So when something is flagged as false or misleading,
Right.
what happens then?
It can be demoted in search results, labeled with warnings, or even removed entirely.
It's like they're injecting a dose of truth serum into these online spaces. But tech platforms can't do it alone, can they? Governments have a role to play in this as well.
Absolutely.
So what are they doing?
Well, governments are waking up to the seriousness of this threat
Yeah.
and taking steps to counter it. They're investing in cybersecurity defenses, developing strategies to expose and disrupt foreign interference, and even enacting laws aimed at curbing the spread of disinformation.
It's a multi-pronged approach. So what does that look like in practice?
Well, for one, intelligence agencies are actively tracking the activities of these groups, gathering evidence, and exposing their tactics.
So they're fighting fire with fire, using intelligence and counterintelligence to combat these information warfare campaigns.
Right, and we're also seeing this legislative push, with governments enacting laws to hold social media platforms accountable for the content they host, and there are efforts to regulate political advertising to make it more transparent and prevent foreign interference.
So they're trying to establish rules of engagement for these online spaces.
Exactly. Ensure that they're being used responsibly.
But laws and intelligence gathering can only go so far, right? Ultimately, don't we as individuals have a responsibility to be more discerning about the information we consume and share?
You're absolutely right. Education and awareness are absolutely critical in this fight.
So what can individuals do?
Well, governments are investing in public awareness campaigns to educate citizens about the threat, teaching them how to recognize disinformation, giving them tools to verify information.
So it's about empowering individuals to become more critical thinkers, to be more skeptical of what they see online.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in this.
So being aware of the tactics used, checking sources, verifying information before sharing it, and promoting those credible voices and authoritative sources.
Absolutely. It's a collective effort.
You provided us with some really fascinating reports on Ghost Raider, and we uncovered a lot in this deep dive, from their infrastructure and tactics to the broader threat of state-sponsored disinformation.
It's complex.
It's a complex and constantly evolving landscape, but we can't afford to be passive bystanders in this fight.
Absolutely not. We need to be informed, vigilant, and engaged.
So stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep asking questions. Until next time.